and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, and the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts, where we review Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday night war between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick. And gents, we are gathered here today to, well, spoiler alert, reveal who is going to eliminate Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble. On this week's episode of Monday Night Raw, Paul Heyman announced that Brock Lesnar is going to enter this year's Royal Rumble match at number 1. And a speculation has been rife since then as to whether he's going to win it. Probably not. Or as to who is going to throw him out of that match and potentially lead to a showdown at WrestleMania. So, Michael Hamflett, who is your money on to eliminate Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble this year?
Cain Velasquez.
The resigned sigh.
Said with a heavy heart.
First
Yes,
of all, actually, what do you think of this idea and this stipulation?
I like it because we can have conversations like this. I like that it throws something new into a fairly tried and tested formula like the Royal Rumble. The fact he's WWE champion adds a bit of spice to whatever happens coming out of it. Even if he was, the bizarre situation in which he was to go on to win, even that would be something new and something interesting to deal with. So I don't really see any negatives other than a couple of the plot holes that formed the idea in the first place. The Royal Rumble, as great as it is, can always benefit from something like this happening. So I'm in favour of it. My sort of resigned acceptance of Cain Velasquez comes from how unsuccessful the first try at this was.
Yeah.
But then I'm looking for the Rumble to maybe boost that and bring that back to life. Velasquez is, was disappeared off television with that injury that he suffered in real life. But it wasn't like it was going well before that point. It wasn't just like, oh, well, he's still fit as a fiddle, so we'll just drop him in the mid-card. Things had not gone well at all. He hadn't been particularly well received on his debut, which I don't think was any fault of his own, but he just didn't necessarily have that physical charisma that Ronda Rousey had done previously. That was the standard that had been set, to a lesser extent Shayna Baszler, and he didn't seem to fit that profile.
There's a certain mould wrestlers have to fit, and Cain Velasquez is a legitimate hard man. He's former UFC heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
But if you look at him, it's the old airport test, I suppose, isn't it?
And, well, not just that, but I think because they were looking to try and promote his MMA pedigree, they then booked an MMA match within the body of a wrestling match. So that didn't work when they fought each other as well. It just looked like Brock dominated him. But what that has done is leveled the series, hasn't it? It's leveled sort of, Kane got the UFC win, Brock got the WWE win, and now they must see a rubber match in that. Otherwise, why have they invested him in the first place?
I know why they've invested in the first place. They saw his exploits, his lucha-adjacent exploits with AAA, and thought, hang on, they're A, partnered with AEW, and B, about to run MSG. We can't have that. Let's sign him up right now, surgically extract anything that made him moderately entertaining to spite AAA and AEW. What became apparent later is that when they tried to run MSG, they completely failed to sell out the building or to even get many fans involved. I think they were moved to the foyer or whatever it was, the little sub-building within it, and it just felt like a really spiteful measure. And I was told all along by preeminent pro wrestling journalists, etc., that, he's not much to look at in the traditional pro wrestling sense, but Cain Velasquez, he's a legitimate hard man, don't deny that at all.
He's been through the Performance Centre a couple of years, hasn't he, and got good reports off the back of it. He
But
seems to have an attitude.
another thing they said was, he's got a great tank, he's got a great engine, the cardio is absolutely off the
Cardio
scale.
Kane, that was his nickname in MMA.
He's not working an Ironman match. He's working Brock Lesnar, and he went 2 minutes. A maximum of 6 or 7. So that was like this weird thing that they used as a USP to try and convince us that he was going to work. It didn't work at all. I can't see this development happening. Ugh.
Do you know what? I'm up until this announcement, I was not hot, I have to admit, on another Cain Velasquez Brock Lesnar match. When he first arrived on SmackDown, of course, after that Kofi Kingston debacle, I was
Partridge feathers.
genuinely excited because, I'm a UFC fan from back in the day. I remember those fights, and the history there I really enjoyed. And yeah, it sort of hit some stumbling blocks, and Rey Mysterio was involved in it, and it kind of muddied the waters a little bit. And then obviously we had that match in Saudi Arabia, and I thought that was not done and dusted. I knew they were going to come back to it, but I had no desire to see it again. But I find if they package it in this way, I genuinely think myself and other fans will get interested in it again. you think about the whole Goldberg thing of like, okay, well, he beat him at Survivor Series, but what happens when they come head-to-head in the Royal Rumble and Goldberg immediately sort of does the exact same thing and eliminates Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble?
How would you feel about him winning, though? Because if he gets Brock at WrestleMania, he's winning the WWE title. Cain Velasquez, WWE champion, will be a thing.
Yeah, but there's been worse WWE champions in recent years.
True. Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree. Maybe, who knows? Who knows what's been going on in the recent months and what could happen between now and April. But I like the way that you have packaged this. It also probably means Cain Velasquez isn't winning the Royal Rumble as well, because there's no real need to have him eliminate Brock and win the Rumble. It senses that
He gets enough with that,
you've derailed Brock's plan to just run through the entire division. And it could be a match if they've genuinely considered it from the moment they had the showdown on SmackDown back a few months ago, that there could be something there, and it's not like they've exhausted all the avenues. As you said, there was a 3-minute match or whatever it was.
Indeed, yeah. I'm a fan of the stipulation. There's a gaping plot hole in that Brock Lesnar's a mercenary, so I don't know why. It's completely unnecessary for him to enter the Royal Rumble, given that he's WWE champion. All he needs to do in character is just wait for the winner to emerge, stand next to Paul Heyman on Raw for a few weeks, and then work presumably a match that's going way shorter than an hour at WrestleMania itself.
Scoop the head open with his elbow.
Yes, so it seems very unnecessary for him to do this, but I do love the added complexity to the Rumble dynamic. I think it's incredibly refreshing. I've spoken at length, and I don't want to repeat myself, on the Raw Review podcast, which you can check out on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Very nice.
But yeah, it just feels like the Royal Rumble hasn't yet sort of evolved as the roster has to incorporate truly athletically elite talent. It feels like a bit of a slow plodding match. I think that could benefit from a real departure of a dynamic that we're getting with Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, as far as we know, 9 Raw stars alongside Brock Lesnar, of course. 10 from SmackDown, 10 from NXT. And although Cain Velasquez does seem the most obvious and arguably the favourite to eliminate Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble, he's not the only contender in there, is he?
No. Ever since he's decided to say goodbye to being totally boring, I'm all for Drew McIntyre being the one.
He's sensational.
This turnaround on Monday Night Raw, that sounds overly critical because, yes, his fundamentals were fantastic. But if that's ever made me not want to watch a wrestler before, it's that description.
Randy Orton.
Drew, exactly. If you could build a Scottish sports entertainer from the ground up, you'd have Drew McIntyre. And that was really part of the problem. But this recent turnaround where he's embraced what appears to be a bit of his real side coming out, a bit of what clearly pops the boys in the locker room, is popping crowds, live at Monday Night Raw. We were fantasy booking that he might get the Brock Lesnar match, but this would be better because it would create a reason for the Brock Lesnar match. What you have in Drew McIntyre...
And there's far more opportunity for him to win.
Yeah, so if he eliminates Brock, he's a believable winner too. And then you've got your WrestleMania title match and 3 more months of this Drew in preparation for a match where he's actually, when it comes down to it, he's the same size as Brock. He can physically dominate Brock in a way that others can't. So you do all the really fun crack on Raw, and then it comes match time, and suddenly you've got a guy standing in front of him that could actually beat him.
A guy who we were pitching last year as a potential Royal Rumble winner. Maybe not in January of last year, but certainly as we headed towards the 2019 Royal Rumble, he was someone we were considering once he returned to WWE.
Indeed. I remember this time last year, or near enough it, when we discussed Drew McIntyre, I couldn't say that man's name without also using the word bargaining, because I wasn't earnestly entertained by Drew McIntyre, really, because I don't think he'd become this entertaining version of himself that he's come out of nowhere over the past fortnight. You just got a sense, looking at his physique, how handsome he is, how shredded he is, how in the mold of a WWE superstar endorsed by Vince McMahon he is, that they wanted to do something with him. And because any sense of an emotional connection with the main roster superstar had been completely eroded into dust, I was, again, bargaining to find, who would Vince like that I can also like well enough that I can actually not get my hands burned by investing in someone and looking at their journey. And then he got mugged off by Dolph Ziggler, and I'm thinking, that's it. Nobody. There's literally no one I can invest in. So I've always felt, obviously, just looking at him, that they've wanted to do something with him, whether they were too inept or otherwise to do it, was seemingly a concern. But he's just come out of nowhere, delivered bags of personality in this new role. He's got the audience's attention. He's got my attention. And I said it last week, but I'll say it again. It bears repeating. If there's any wrestler that Michael Hamflett has just staunchly refused to get on board with. It's Drew McIntyre. And the mere fact that he's now his number one fave, that must mean they're doing something really special with him, quietly.
And arguably, regardless of the plans WWE have had, this is the perfect time to put yourself out there, because we know WWE like to change plans right up to the last second.
Yeah, there's no better time to show yourself than the road to WrestleMania. It used to be that it had to be around Survivor Series time or even post SummerSlam because they would plan in advance. But Kofi Kingston stepped in for an injured guy like a week before the pay-per-view, and that was where his build properly started. So there was precedent before that, but certainly last year's has told us that it's never too late. You've got about a month at least that you could still theoretically put yourself into a WrestleMania title program.
Let's talk about a guy who could physically do the similar things to Kane and Drew, but doesn't look the same, but certainly arguably would be accepted as a fan favorite right now and is still hot coming off the back of Survivor Series and War Games, and that is Keith Lee. Does he have a shot of eliminating Brock?
I'm not entirely sure. My feelings on the NXT involvement at Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, is that they're going to do very much the same thing they did at Survivor Series. They're going to further attempt to legitimize the brand by having it on equal footing with Raw and SmackDown, maybe even literally so with a 10-10-10 combination of stars from each brand. But I think that it would look too much like a promotion if Keith Lee was to eliminate and thus subsequently target Brock Lesnar. The optics of that, to me, and therefore possibly a casual fan, would be like, all right, okay, well, he wants to get out of that small building that NXT I'm only vaguely aware of runs in because he wants to hit the big time. If it's Keith Lee winning the Royal Rumble, which I think is a great shout for a potential takeover, and there is a takeover at WrestleMania weekend, is there? Of course there is, yeah. I think it would just speak to how powerful NXT is as a third brand, no longer developmental. If someone like a Keith Lee were to win the Rumble, it would get the headlines, it would further legitimize NXT as a brand, and if he targets the NXT champion Adam Cole or Tommaso Ciampa or whoever, then it would be like, right, well, he's not just looking at Brock Lesnar for the big payday or the big main event, because NXT itself is the main event. So I would be careful personally of having Keith Lee just go, all right, well, there's Brock Lesnar, screw this NXT malarkey.
I will say this, Brock being in the Rumble in general allows for a lot of different ways to book him. So he's coming in at number one, so you've got a load of guys that could be 1-versus-1 with Brock, and then you could have a certain few of your favourites to someone, like a few guys from NXT trying to team up to get him to make a name for himself. Keith Lee, I can visualise a spot in which it's a fairly crowded ring, and then Brock is suddenly separated from a pack, and Keith Lee just pounces him out of nowhere, and Brock gets eliminated. I'm not saying Brock can get up like Adam Cole and get into the fourth row, but he can propel himself over the top rope.
He's one of the best at doing that.
Yeah,
It's reckless. It's great.
And then Lee doesn't even really need to go on to win the Royal Rumble. That spot becomes what we talk. He didn't win at the Survivor Series, but he won in other ways, didn't he? He made his name over that weekend, and he could go on to finish in the final four or get eliminated shortly after. But one of the things people are going to be talking about is that moment in the middle of the match where Keith Lee just emerged from a corner, so he's been selling with a pounce, outflies Brock, huge pop, as much for the surprise as anything else, and Keith Lee left stood in the ring, staring down at him. If not for today, if not for tomorrow, there's something 6 months down the line. Lee remains a made man.
And he is one of the hottest properties in WWE right now. Let's talk about the guy who is odds-on favourite to win the Men's Royal Rumble and his chances of eliminating Brock Lesnar. Roman Reigns. His year for winning the Royal Rumble and being accepted as the winner?
I would say so. The timing's right. He's earned a degree of sympathy through genuine heroism. It's finally his time. Literally every other year it wasn't his time because there was someone better in the way, or there was someone more popular in the way, or there was just a sense of they could really get someone over rather than Roman, who just organically was not it. I just think that it looks like Roman versus The Fiend. They're not going to cross the streams, so I don't think he'd be given the rub, because if he was given the rub of eliminating Brock Lesnar and then moving focus to The Fiend, it would just feel like, right, we get it, stop forcing him down our throats. He'd have to be... I think the fans would repel him if it was a sort of have his cake and eat it too scenario. Can I just say one thing that just popped into my mind, away from actually eliminating him, is that it would be so magic for me if Brock Lesnar comes out at number one. You get a ridiculously violent comedy elimination if someone like Zack Ryder comes out at number two, and you can pretty much best be certain if they're going for that route, he is going into the fourth row with a German suplex. If there was a stream, a wave of jobbers in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it looks like this insurmountable task. How awesome would it be to have Shorty G come out in 8 and just avoid getting eliminated, and the drama he could deliver over 2 minutes of actually nearly eliminating him. I think there's as much story in the near elimination as the elimination itself, and I think Shorty G would be an awesome recipient of that.
You and I have spoken previous to this about
Shorty G. Just call him Chad friggin' Gable.
previous to this about the sort of callback to a CM Punk, not suggesting CM Punk is going to be involved in this.
That'd be
but
good thumbnail.
A CM Punk-esque pipe bomb by Paul Heyman as Brock Lesnar tears through the first few people to come out for the Royal Rumble.
Oh, indeed. He could bury 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then seek to bury Chad Gable, and then his reaction, maybe with a fallen microphone out of his hand, as he's got the better of his client, would just be magic.
It's always amazing in a Rumble when somebody finally stops that run as well. I think it was John Cena that stopped CM Punk. It was Randy Savage that stopped Diesel, kind of the first time they tried that trope. The pop for somebody being able to like stop that run of momentum for that heel, that big guy, or just that preeminent threat that makes everybody think, well, what's the point in even entering this match, because he's just going to run through them all. Even the Big Show, I think when, it's obviously that Rumble is not very well remembered now because of the eventual winner, but the point with the Big Show is that everybody that was coming in was trying to eliminate him to the point where Chris Benoit was the last guy and he had to do it on his own. Like, they could theoretically have Brock go all the way to the end if he's got the tank or the engine or the want to do that, and then have him somehow survive all these elimination attempts, just so it puts over that last guy, that winner, even more so. And with Sidgwick, I think it's probably too much to give to Roman in one night. I think you do risk the resentment. I worry that the resentment is there all the same, because I've heard it in crowds this year when I just wouldn't have expected it. So the last thing I want is for Roman to get booed. You don't want to create a situation that might cause that. But if Brock somehow sustained all these elimination attempts and then Roman gets it done, that's an earnest attempt to make him look like he's done everything he possibly can to earn that spot at WrestleMania.
Two faces of Gable. Right, let's talk about a real-life superhero who could eliminate Brock Lesnar. Ricochet, what are his chances?
No good now that you've given him that qualifier, because you're mocking him just by mentioning it. Like the real-life superhero...
They like to mention it quite a lot.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to take away his actual superhero aura that they didn't need to tell us about.
No.
Ricochet is amazing, and I would have rather he been a Royal Rumble opponent than a Royal Rumble match adversary. There would have been a lot of fun and a lot of like high octane drama in 5 minutes of Ricochet flying around Brock in a failed attempt to win the title, rather than somehow being the one to elevate him over the top rope. He'll look great in a match like this. I think he's probably a rule-proven exception to Sidgwick's point about the work rate guys in the Royal Rumble. If he can incorporate some of his high spots into a Rumble, I think that's perfect use. Last year was it Casey Catanzaro was doing those like elimination escapes. Ricochet's got them in him beyond anything Kofi Kingston or John Morrison's parkour has ever shown us, but not the one to chuck Brock out, I don't think.
No?
No.
Let's move on to a final couple of names. Matt Riddle is another name that's not necessarily been mentioned in this context, but always seems to be mentioned in the same breath as Brock Lesnar for obvious reasons.
Yeah, he's been working it, and I think that work should be rewarded. There's something in this, beyond just it would be amazing and it's what he wants to do, and I'm being worked on Twitter. If you look at Matt Riddle, famously, as Dave Meltzer proclaimed, huge for teenage boys. He's absolutely huge for teenage boys. Just absolutely fantastic crack. Absolutely fantastic. But if you look at Matt Riddle, and there's the obvious, he's a bit of a bugger on Twitter, so you don't know if there's any kind of hidden disciplinary or just a quiet, we're not going to push you if you continue to be so volatile on socials. We need
He's a
kind
maverick.
A bit of a maverick that maybe they want the thumb to be kept on him. But for me, given how well NXT is booked, and given how they don't suffer from that disease of the main roster of, oh, well, if you like him, Vince doesn't, so like each kind of thing, they reward fans who watch the product. That's what's so magic about NXT. But sort of conspicuously, Matt Riddle hasn't been like featured heavily. He's lost a match at TakeOver. He had an early feud with Killian Dane. He's sort of kind of been directionless. And I genuinely think it's not for NXT having no ideas for him or wishing to push him in a top program. I think there's a remit from genuine upper management, i.e. Vince, possibly Paul Heyman. Don't put him in a position where we can't just take him when we need him. I think there's been a specific remit wherein they're not doing anything with Matt Riddle because the idea is he could just be transplanted to Raw like a day's notice. Whether that actually means there's a big plan for him to do this at the Royal Rumble is something else. I'm just floating it as a possibility because for me, there's no other reason why he isn't sort of locked into a big plan on NXT TV.
And not like this has any bearing on whether or not this happens or not, but his entrance music would be perfect for the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, a huge popper. I admire your optimism there, Cedric, because I just think he's been being punished for mouthing off a bit online. I think it's the sad opposite and the grim reality of how it always used to be whenever anyone would get themselves in trouble on the internet. But it would be fantastic. If only so Riddle could say, well, yeah, I'm going to challenge you for WrestleMania, Brock. And then 1 week, when it looks as if AEW have got the most loaded Dynamite card of all time,
Here it comes.
NXT promote Brock Lesnar in Full Sail for the first time, because who's not tuning in for that? To keep that as
Vince will laugh at how he when he walks through the locker room.
yeah, like just he's going to tear up the ring like the old Nexus did, just to see if there's like actual normal wrestling stuff underneath it. What is this toy town that I've just walked into? Like everyone would watch that. And for WWE to be able to keep that in the locker as a guaranteed ratings winner, I just think would be too much fun for them not to deploy in the run to WrestleMania, especially if they are going to feature NXT in the way that we've perhaps all assumed.
Right, let's move on to the final name on this list, and it kind of goes without saying that you have to mention him in 2020, the year he returns to a WWE wrestling ring. CM Punk not wrestling in 2020 is, of course, a work. Could CM Punk be the guy to eliminate Brock Lesnar?
No.
No, of course not. More chance of Shane McMahon.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. CM Punk is coming back, if he ever comes back, to main event WrestleMania.
If he eliminates Brock Lesnar and then faces him for the WWE Championship? Surely that's the main event.
He's got to work first. He wants nothing to do with this dog and pony show. He wants everything that he feels he was robbed of the last time, and it was guys like The Rock and guys like Brock Lesnar that wouldn't be expected to do this just to get to WrestleMania.
There's a nice symmetry of obviously Royal Rumble 2014 was the last show he worked. Maybe there's something in that.
So
but
you're telling me there's a chance?
it's just doesn't inspire me. Doesn't inspire me. He's on backstage. No one gives a toss. I don't give a toss. He's kind of.
I moderately give a toss, but this still doesn't feel like the route. Like, I don't even think Punk as part of WWE's current landscape is the route to him being at WrestleMania. I think, like, one of the reasons why I think the Steve Austin dream match seemed to make so much sense to people is that neither of them really exist in this world. It almost felt like a Saudi Arabia match transposed onto a WrestleMania card. And I think Punk doesn't need to be featured amongst the talent of the main roster, not least because I worry for him that he might be exposed.
Very, very quickly, a name I haven't mentioned and I should, otherwise we'll get complaints. This is not going to be Daniel Bryan's role, is it? Because it would muddy the waters so much with either a Roman Reigns win and the fact he's got a championship match on the same night.
They've teased it. They've teased the backstage interaction on SmackDown, whether that means they could revisit it by having Roman Reigns, Royal Rumble winner, put his sort of opportunity on the line against Daniel Bryan at either Fastlane or the Chamber. Who knows?
Big risk.
Big risk. It's just they've done it once before, but they wouldn't do anything stupid again for the second time. It's just not that company, is it?
Oh, God, so it's going to be Bray Wyatt eliminating him again. So yet again not lead to a WrestleMania match. Cool.
We've, on the title of this podcast, put our flags down and said, not just who's it going to be, this is who it's going to be. So a quick lightning round. Who actually is it going to be, Michael Hamflett?
It's got to be Cain Velasquez.
I'm inclined to agree. And I think that as much as it causes you to sigh and roll your eyes, I think in the interim, you will come round to it. Or I'll try to make you come round to it at least.
That's not going to work.
Come on.
Who you got? You can't say Cody. Who you got?
I'd like to think, I would like to think that given how long he's been in that bloody room, given that I haven't depushed him for his kind of cringeworthy promos, which portray how awesome he is in the ring, given that they are truly trying, it seems, to push him as an actual force on Raw right now, why not Aleister Black? I'm going to predict it right now. Aleister Black is going to eliminate Brock Lesnar from the 2020 Royal Rumble, and the promos are going to be weird, man. They're going to be pretty weird. But
Heyman scripting both guys. Like, I love this. Oh, I love the God. That's his pet project, isn't it?
I just think it's the Heyman main event is a possible test for how much more influence he could possibly get down the line. Because there's no one else. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Kevin Owens. If there's anyone that the fans really want it to be, if the fans who are desperate to cheer him in spite of so much evidence of, right, we're just going to make you not want to cheer him by making him look like a tosser like we always do, then he should be at least a honourable mention. But I just think they see something in Aleister Black that they haven't executed, but he's my pick, my definitive balls-out pick.
I won't even make a pasty bet because I want you to be right.
Yeah.
Like, it's with no joy
I agree.
that I take it in Velasquez.
Let us know your predictions on the man who will eliminate Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble match in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and watch there. Follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamlet at
Michael Hamlet.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
And you can follow me at Adam Wilborn. As I said, follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. This has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.